Now let's begin with our subject, that is the industrial pharmacy. Very good morning to all my dear students, and we are on to the industrial pharmacy. So in case of pre-formulation, just to recall the things, just to recall the parameters that we had already covered. So which are the parameters that we had covered? We had covered the crystalline structure, we had covered the amorphous, we had covered the solubility, we had covered the particle size, shape. What else? The pre-formulation, its types, etc. In the last lecture, we have started the partition coefficient along with the particle size or the flow properties. No doubt the particle size, the particle shape, that is directly responsible for the flow properties. Now, while studying the partition coefficient and the flow properties, we had gone through the what is the partition coefficient, that is the log P. Then how to determine the partition coefficient. There is a lab scale method which is said to be the, yes, what is the name of the method? Very correct. It is the shake flask method, right? Now what is the partition solvent? What is the example? Yes, the example is the octanol. Why generally the octanol is taken? Because with the help of octanol there is a classification of the hypodiscriminating and the hyperdiscriminating solvents. Yes, very correct. In case of partition coefficient, what we are doing, we are taking the aqueous phase and we are taking the organic phase, right? And we are allowing the drug to distribute into the two different phases. Okay. After that, we have started the pre-formulation property, another one which is said to be the flow property. Now, flow property in terms of the bulk density and the angle of repose. Now, what is the bulk density? What is the tap density? We know that bulk density, that is nothing but the mass upon volume. When we are taking the API or any powdered material into the measuring cylinder, and when we are observing the particular upper layer, where it will coincides with that of the measuring cylinder, the graduation marks which are there onto the measuring cylinder. So that particular will be taken as the volume, and the weight of the powder, that will be taken as the mass. So mass divided by volume, that will gives you the bulk density. And there is a tap density. What is the tap density? It is a particular density. No doubt it is the mass upon volume, but how it is obtained? It is obtained by giving certain number of frequent tappings to that of the measuring cylinder, so that the volume of the powder material or the API, that will goes on reducing, and this reduced volume, that will be taken as a volume, and the mass. So whatever the mass will be taken, 10 gram, 20 gram, 100 gram, divided by the volume which is obtained after giving the tappings. So generally the tappings, these are given at say 100 tappings, right? So that is the bulk density and that is the tap density. Now, why these are important? We are onto the flow properties and how or which are the parameters that will determine the flow properties of any powdered material. Now, it is said that particularly the coarse index, that is responsible for indicating, or it is the indicator to express the flow properties of the powdered material. And it was given by Ralph L. Carr in 1965, and that's why since onward it will be known as cost index. How it is expressed? It is expressed in terms of percentage. How it is to be calculated? It is to be calculated by tap density minus pore density divided by tap density multiplied by 100. So that's why we will be getting the percent quantity. Now there is another indicator which will express the flow property, which is known as Hausner's ratio. Now what is this Hausner's ratio? Hausner's ratio, that is the tab density divided by pore density multiplied by 100. So again it is the ratio, again it is expressed in terms of the percentage. So Hausner's ratio, it should be less than 1.25. If it is less than 1.25, then we can say that the particular powder that is having the, that is possessing the good kind of flow properties, and it is equivalent to that of the 20% of the Carr's index. And if the Hausner's ratio that is greater than 1.25, then we can say that the powder that will possess the poor flow properties, which is equivalent to that of the 33% of the Carr's index. So it is very necessary that the glidant that should be used between the Hausner's ratio of 1.25 to 1.5 to improve the flow property, right? Now, if the value that is in between 1.25 to 1.5, that means if it is more than 1.25, it is the indicator that there is a poor flow property. And in order to improve this flow property, there is a need to add the glidant. What are the glidant? What are the lubricant? That we will going to come to know in our subsequent lectures. But at this moment, it is very important that when this is the case, if the Hausner's ratio that is more than 1.25, there is need to add the glidant in order to improve the flow properties. So here you can see the relationship between the Hausner's ratio, Carr's index, and the flow property, and how it is to be expressed. So the fair and poor flow may be promoted using the glidants. As already I told you that if it is more than 1.25, if the Hausner's ratio that is more than 1.25, here you can see if it is more than 1.25, then in such cases there is a need to add the glidance. So generally the aerosol in the percentage of 0.2 that will be used as a glidant in order to promote, in order to improve the flow property. Now, if the Gauss index that is equivalent to or less than 10, then we can say that the powder that will possess the excellent flow property. Same is the case associated with the Hausner's ratio if it is in the range of 1 to 1.11. If Gauss index is in the range of 11 to 15, we can say that the powder, the material that will possess the good flow property. Same is the case associated with that of the Hausner's ratio if it is in the range of 1.12 to 1.18. It is said that it is fair, the flow property is fair, which do not require the addition of the glidant. So it is in the range of 16 to 20. And for Hausner's ratio, it is 1.19 to 1.25. It is the optimum limit. And if the value that will goes beyond 1.25 Hausner's ratio and more than 20, if it is the Carr's index, then we can say that these are the cases which are associated with the poor kind of flow property, which would be expressed as possible, poor, and very poor, and very, very poor. So these cases, they will require the addition of the glider. Now the next parameter which is used in order to express, in order to determine the flow property, that is the angle of repose. Now what is this angle of repose? This can be calculated, this can be done, this can be determined by taking some amount of powder. Now, it is not possible just with 1 gram or 2 gram or 10 gram. We need at least 100 gram of the powdered material. And in case of our lab, what we are doing, we are taking the tripod stand, we are taking the funnel, we are maintaining a particular height, we are placing the powder into the funnel, and we are allowing the powder to flow through the funnel. Now, when the powder material that will flow through the funnel, it will going to form a conical heap like this as it is shown onto the board. Now, why I am showing all these things, you can see onto this particular region that here it is showing that the powder that is with the free flowing property, and here it is saying that the powder that is with the poor flow property, or it is having the cohesive nature. Now it means what? Suppose if the height of cone that is less, and if this angle is less, then we can say that the powder that will be possessing the good flow property, or it is the free flowing. Contrary to this, you can see into this particular picture, the height is too much, and if the height is too much, definitely this angle will be more. So this will indicate that there is a cohesive property and they do not possess the free flowing property, which may need the addition of the gliders. Now, how it is to be calculated? After allowing the powder material to pass through the through the funnel, we have to measure the diameter of this base of this conical heap, right? So the diameter that will be shown as D, and the height that will be shown as H. And then you can see that here there is a particular triangle, and the angle at this particular point that is to be shown as a theta. And how the angle of repose that is to be calculated? Angle of repose, that is the determinant. It is responsible to show whether the powder that is possessing the flow properties or not. So there is a formula which is said that angle of repose theta is equal to tan inverse 2h divided by d. So this will gives you the angle of repose, and it will depend on various factors. What are these? These are particle shape, density, surface area, coefficient of friction, high moisture, and the high mechanical interlocking, along with the electrostatic charges. If the particle size is not uniform, if the particle shape is not uniform, the powder may not possess the good flow property. If the density is too much low, again they will possess the less flow property. If the surface area that is too much high, there is a interparticular attraction which may not able to offer the flow properties. Coefficient of friction, if the friction is less, that means they will possess the good flow property. If the particle they are in close association, in that case they do not able to flow freely. The moisture, high moisture content, it is also one of the obstruction in the flow properties of the powdered material. Now, if we want to express the angle of repose and the type of flow for the given powdered material, from this particular table, we can make different expressions. Now, if the value of angle of repose, that is the tan theta, which we saw in the particular formula, and if the values which are obtained that are between 25 to 30, then we can say that the powder material that will possess the excellent flow properties. So the powder material with the angle of repose 25 to 30, that will be desirable in case of pharma industry. So if it is 31 to 35, we can say that that is the, with the good flow properties. And if the value that will goes beyond 36 to onward, and we can see that as the value that will moves from 36 onward, the kind of flow property that will goes on decreasing. So if it is 36 to 40, it is fair. If it is 41 to 45, it will passable. If it is 46 to 55, it is poor. If it is 56 to 65, it is very poor. And if it is more than 66, we can say that they are with the very, very poor flow properties. So what we saw in this particular lecture, we saw the partition coefficient and we saw the flow properties, right? What are are the indicator of the flow properties? Cost index, Poisson's ratio, and the angle of repose. Now let's come to the new parameter, that is say the chemical properties in case of pre-formulation. Now here we have to study particularly the various chemical reactions, the effect of chemical reactions that are occurring in case of pre-formulation, and our lesson plan that will move through the various chemical properties like say hydrolysis, oxidation, reduction, effect of temperature, and so on. Just to recall the things, what is important in case of pre-formulation? What are the three important words? As I told you before, so these are stable, effective, and safe. So the same is applicable here also for the chemical parameters. Now, when we are studying the chemical reactions like say hydrolysis or oxidation or reduction, we want the stability in terms of our pre-formulation is concerned. We want effectiveness, we want safety. Now, for all these reasons, again, during the process of pre-formulation, there is need to study the chemical properties and the chemical reactions. So we know that the API, that is the active pharmaceutical ingredient, it will changes as it will undergo the process of storage, processing, and during its shelf life, it will undergo the process of degradation. And this degradation could be because of the humidity, pH, temperature, and the light. So what is the aim of stability? Particularly in pre-formulation, the aim is to ensure the stability of the API during the storage, processing, and throughout its shelf life. Now, hydrolysis is what? Hydrolysis, it is the process which is said to be the lysis or the breakdown in presence of water. Now, let us say here there is a compound which is said to be the AB. When it is subjected to the water or when there is an effect of water onto this AB, it will get hydrolyzed into the A and B. So if we want to define the hydrolysis, how we can define it? For a drug in solution, it is a nucleophilic attack of labile bonds by the water. So what is the hydrolysis? Hydrolysis, it is the process in which the water that will attack onto the hydrogen bonds. So for a drug solution, it is the nucleophilic attack of labile bonds by the water. That's why it is the hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is a two-stage process where a nucleophile such as water or the hydroxyl ion adds to, for example, an acyl carbon to form an intermediate form which the leaving group breaks away in the second stage. So you can see here the particularly types of the hydrolysis. The structure of the compound that will affect the hydrolysis rate, there is a RCX, X is any compound, and there is O. Type 1 hydrolysis, it is the hydrolysis when the X that either might be acid or amide, and this is the case, then the type of hydrolysis which is occurred, that is said to be the type 1 hydrolysis. So what is this X? This X is either amide or ester group, and that is possible in case of the acids. Whereas in case of type 2 hydrolysis, the X atom, it may be halogen or any other. Now, when the X is either halogen or any other atom, that kind of hydrolysis reaction which is occurred is said is called to be the type 2 hydrolysis. Now, if we are going on controlling the volume or the values of the pH, so we can go for controlling this type 1 hydrolysis through the process of the pH modulation, pH modification. Now, there are some of the examples for acid or base catalyzed reactions. That is the ester example, aspirin, thiol ester example, spironolactone, amide example, that is the chloramphenicol, sulfonamide example, that is the sulfapyrazine, imide example, that is the phenobarbital, and the lactam example, that is the methicillin. So here is the structure which is shown for the atropine, and this atropine that will undergo the process of hydrolysis. Now, how it will undergo hydrolysis? When the pH value that is more than 4. In that case, the atropine that will undergo the process of hydrolysis. So higher the pH, that will lowers the stability because of the process of hydrolysis. And that is what is the reason that why soda lime glass that is to be avoided as a container material for the atropine, because upon storage upon longer duration of time, this is responsible for releasing or leaching out the alkalis from the soda lime glass, and it will affect the stability of the atropine. So the aqueous atropine solution buffered at around pH of 3.5 to 4. There is need to maintain the buffering system in order to prevent the hydrolysis of the atropine at a pH value more than 4. Another example of a procaine. Procaine, it is the anesthetic. And this procaine that will undergo the process of acid catalyzed hydrolysis and will affect its stability if the value of pH is less than 2.5. That means if it is acidic. So the base catalyzed hydrolysis that is possible if the value of pH is more than 5.5. So the procaine that is highly unstable, it will undergo the process of acid hydrolysis, it will undergo the process of base catalysis. So there is need to maintain the pH between the 2.5 to 5.5. So the maximum stability that could be occurring at a pH value of 3.5. So that is between these two. Hydrolysis protection is done by increasing solubility of a non-aqueous solvent and by micellization of the drug using the surfactant for shielding the drug hydrolysis. So the factors affecting the hydrolysis that are the solution pH. As I told you that there is need to maintain the pH in order to prevent the hydrolysis of the atropine and the procaine. There is need to add the buffer salts. Ionic strength is important. The use of non-aqueous solvents are important. Presence of co-solvent, presence of complexing agent, temperature, and the humidity. So all these factors are responsible for the process of hydrolysis. We had studied in sufficient details the aspect associated with the pH, ionic strength, and the buffer. So these are to be maintained in order to get the stability. If you see the solvent, that is the non-aqueous solvents, they will avoid the process of hydrolysis. So that's why these are advisable. So use of a co-solvent that will increases the stability, as we saw in the very first or second lecture, that the co-solvents, the use of two different solvent, that is for the process of improving the stability aspect. So it will suppress the ionization, they will reduce the extreme of pH, and they will act by reducing the water activity. So these are the different ways by which the non-solvent or the co-solvent or the non-aqueous solvents, they will act and they will improve the stability. 20% propylene glycol in chlorodiazepoxide hydrochloride injection. This is also used in order to maintain the stability. Now there is a reaction which is said to be the complexation, micellization, and the solubilization. So complexation with various agents like say the EDTA, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, EDTA, and the lipids. We can go for the process of micellization with the surfactants and solubilization either by co-solvent, complexation, or micellization. Now, where the drug location is important in case of the process of solubilization. So, the location of drug in solubilization, the location of non-polar or polar compound in the micelle governs their level of protection from the process of hydrolysis. Non-polar compounds which are solubilized deep. You can see here, this particular picture, they will show that there is a micelles. Now, temperature and humidity, again, they will be having their effect on the process of stability through the hydrolysis. How it is? Because if the temperature is increased, the moisture content that will goes on decreasing. Now when the moisture content that will get decreased, that will causes reduction into the process of hydrolysis. So they will slow the process of hydrolysis. Now contrary to this, if there is a high humidity, that may trigger the hydrolytic degradation. So the higher temperature that is responsible for reducing the moisture content, for reducing the humidity, so that the process of hydrolysis that can be slowed down, whereas the presence of humidity or moisture that will increase the process of hydrolytic degradation.